There are several species of snake in Jamaica, and in this video you will find out if any of these are venomous. It's rare for humans to come in contact with snakes in Jamaica, as the snakes on the island tend to be reclusive and mainly active at night. Over the course of several decades, the snake population in Jamaica has been greatly impacted by the development of infrastructure and the clearing of lands for farming, which has reduced their natural habitat. The arrival of certain predatory mammals has also affected the number of snakes in Jamaica. For example, the introduction of the mongoose to Jamaica in 1872 to try and control the rat population has had a particularly devastating effect on the island's snakes. So, have you ever encountered a snake in Jamaica? Are Jamaican snakes dangerous? Let's take a look at these 7 species of snakes in Jamaica. The Jamaican boa. Though it may look like a beast, the Jamaican boa is actually harmless. Also known as the yellow snake, the Jamaican boa typically grows up to an impressive 6 to 8 feet long. Endemic to Jamaica, hence the name, the Jamaican boa has a distinctive yellow and black zigzag pattern along its body. Though the Jamaican boa is the largest terrestrial predator on the island, it is non-venomous and mainly feeds off lizards, rodents, birds, and bats. It captures its prey by staying motionless and camouflage before pouncing on its unsuspecting victim, biting them with its needle-like teeth and killing them by constriction. The Jamaican boa is nocturnal and lives in trees, meaning it's rare for humans to ever encounter them in the wild. However, their natural habitat has been greatly reduced over the decades, and they have been known to venture into urban areas to look for food. When found in urban areas, Jamaican boas are often killed, as they are seen as a threat despite being harmless to humans. Jamaican dwarf boa. A number of species of dwarf boa live on the island of Jamaica, including the Asian dwarf boa, the Portland dwarf boa, and the Jamaican dwarf boa. Also referred to as wood snakes or thunder snakes, species of dwarf boa are common throughout South and Central America. The Jamaican dwarf boa is non-venomous and completely harmless to humans. Reclusive and preferring to live in forests and swamps, the Jamaican dwarf boa grows to a maximum size of only around 60 centimeters, living mainly off a diet of frogs and lizards. Much like the larger Jamaican boa, the dwarf boa is also under threat due to a loss of its natural habitation and the introduction of predatory mammals such as the mongoose and wild cats. When threatened, the Jamaican dwarf boa's unnerving form of defense is to instantly bleed from its mouth and the nostrils and roll up into a ball. The grass snake. The grass snake is also a non-venomous snake that is known to reside in Jamaica, as well as much of the rest of the world. The grass snake usually has a dark green body with a flash of color at the back of the head and typically grows to around 70 centimeters in length. Also completely harmless to humans. The grass snake is sometimes called the water snake as they live close to ponds, rivers, and lakes and are good swimmers. The grass snake's diet mainly consists of small amphibians such as frogs and toads. If threatened, the grass snake has a number of tricks up its sleeve. In order to deter attackers, the grass snake will emit a grim odor that is said to smell a lot like garlic. Like the Jamaican dwarf boa, the grass snake can also secrete blood from the mouth and nostrils. They can also fake death, a process called thanatosis. Most predators will only hunt live prey, and by playing dead as well as stinking of garlic, the grass snake can make itself a lot less desirable to hunters. The Jamaican ground snake. The Jamaican ground snake also goes by the name the Jamaican racer. There are several species of ground snake, including the red ground snake and the long-tailed ground snake. Sadly, as is the threat faced by all Jamaican snake, it is thought that the black ground snake may now be extinct. Like all of Jamaica's snake species, the population of ground snake is known to be in rapid decline. Their natural habitat, mostly on the east coast of Jamaica, is threatened by residential development as well as the expansion of the tourist industry. They are also commonly hunted by mammals that have been introduced to Jamaica such as the mongoose and the feral cats. Ground snakes live in moist environments where they can forage for their prey, and their diet consists mostly of small frogs and lizards. They are more active in the day, which means that they are more likely to come into contact with humans than nocturnal snakes. They are no threat to humans as they are non-venomous and do not bite. The Jamaican blind snake. The Jamaican blind snake is probably one of the least lethal animals you could ever wish to encounter. Looking more like a long worm, the Jamaican blind snake is the smallest of the island snake. The Jamaican blind snake lives mostly underground and can sometimes be found underneath rocks or logs in various different habitats all over the island. Though they are hard to spot, it's not uncommon to come across them if you start digging around. As the name suggests, the Jamaican blind snake has virtually no power of sight. The two dots that they have for eyes are believed only to be able to tell the difference between light and the dark. Otherwise, almost entirely featureless, the color of the Jamaican blind snake can vary from gray, brown, and pink. Of all of the snakes in Jamaica, the blind snake is considered to be the least at risk from environmental changes and the least threatened by extinction. The Jamaican eye-spot boa. The Jamaican eye-spot boa is another variant of the Tropidophis family that the Jamaican dwarf boa also belongs to. The Jamaican eye-spot boa can usually either be bright orange or a dark brown color and has been known to change color during the course of a day. Another non-venomous snake, they pose no threat to humans, and as they are highly secretive, it's incredibly unlikely that you'll come across a Jamaican eye-spot boa. They tend to be found in their preferred habitats of rainforest, dry limestone forests, swamps, and scrubs. The Jamaican eye-spot boa mostly feeds on small frogs and lizards. Similar to the grass snake, if threatened, the Jamaican eye-spot boa also defends itself by letting out an unholy stench. As with most of Jamaica's snake, the eye-spot boa is also threatened by the continuing loss of habitat and through being hunted by non-native mammals. The Portland Ridge dwarf boa. The Portland Ridge dwarf boa is another snake endemic to Jamaica, and specifically the Portland Ridge region on the south of the island from where it gets its name. It's thought that this is the only place on the entire island that the Portland Ridge dwarf boa can be found. Despite living so close to the coast, the Portland Ridge dwarf boa lives mainly in dry areas, hiding out under rocks or in caves. Very little is known about this elusive snake's behavior, except that it has chosen to stay in this one small corner of Jamaica. As is sadly a common trend among Jamaica's snake species, the population of the Portland Ridge boa is thought to be decreasing as the dreaded mongoose and other mammals continue to hunt them for food. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature has listed the Portland Ridge dwarf boa as critically endangered, only one ranking away from being extinct in the wild. So, would you rather to encounter a Jamaican snake or accidentally drop your phone in the ocean while taking an Instagram selfie? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you.
Jamaica beautiful and nice, so I could just live the life.
And that me know too.
The Voyage of the Bounty. Still waters of the great golden sea. Flying fish like streaks of silver, and the mermaids that sing in the night. The Southern Cross and all the stars on the other side of the world. This was a toast given by Bounty midshipman Roger Byam to his 1787 voyage to collect the breadfruit. These dramatic words heralded the start of an equally dramatic voyage to collect a simple fruit, named for the fact that its thick, white, starchy interior is reminiscent of bread. The breadfruit was in high demand by the 18th century British West Indian planters, particularly those in Jamaica. Between 1780 and 1786, Jamaica suffered from an alternating hurricane and long periods of drought that destroyed crops. Slave provision grounds were hard hit, and there was a major food shortage. The planters were concerned because they knew that without a reliable food source, their slaves would die of starvation. From as early as the 16th and 17th centuries, there had been talk of a tree in the Pacific Islands that provided a source of bread all year round. The planters offered large rewards to any captain who would bring back such a miraculous plant. When this failed, they petitioned King George III to organize a special expedition to find and deliver it. Captain William Bligh, an experienced 33-year-old seaman who had sailed with Captain Cook on his second voyage around the world from 1772 to 75, was named the commander of this expedition. His crew, including first mate and good friend Fletcher Christian, set sail from Portsmouth, England for Tahiti and Timor and the HMS Bounty a few days before Christmas, 1787. Their mission to collect seedless breadfruit plants and deliver them to Jamaica. Thus our connection to the mutiny on the Bounty, what many see as the greatest mutiny ever. Some 10 months later, the bounty arrived in Tahiti, set up camp, and Bligh began the process of collecting the plants. So tireless was Bligh's pursuit of the plant that he soon earned the nickname Breadfruit Bligh. 5 months and over 1,000 plants later, Bligh decided to set sail for the Caribbean. 2 weeks into that 1789 ocean voyage, however, members of his crew, led by first mate Christian, mutinied. They set Bligh and 18 crew members who remained loyal to him adrift in an open boat and threw the breadfruit plants overboard. Some were even used to stone Bligh.
They're trying to take over the ship!
There's a mutiny!
This treacherous act, which was turned into a famous history now terms the most famous mutiny ever, may have been committed because Christian wanted to return to Tahiti, where he had found his true love. Others say the reason for the crew's anger was Bligh's arrogance and his excessive concern about the survival of the precious breadfruit cargo. Bligh is said to have denied crew members water in favor of using it to irrigate the plants.
I'm afraid he'll die without it.
You'll give no one water without my permission.
The mutineers set a course for Tahiti, leaving Bligh with very little food, dependent on his pocket watch, sextant, and his navigational skills for survival. Luckily for him, they were outstanding. Bligh completed what many feel is still one of the greatest recorded feats of navigation. He covered over 3,600 miles in 41 days before setting foot back on land. It is no wonder that many consider Bligh one of the greatest sailors to have ever lived. Only one of the 18 men with Bligh died, and that was due to stoning by angry natives on an island where they tried to land for provisions. Meanwhile, Christian and the rest of the mutineers realized that they could not return to Tahiti for fear of execution. They therefore sailed around the Cook Islands looking for a place to hide from the British warships they assumed were after them. The mutineers eventually would end up in the Pitcairn Islands of the South Pacific. Within 10 years, only a few of the mutineers were left alive. One of them, John Adams, repented and became a reformed Christian, eventually giving his name to the capital of Pitcairn, Adamstown. As for Bligh, he was exonerated and sent on a second voyage to collect the breadfruit for the West Indies. This time, he set sail with more men and more ships. Although he suffered from fevers and migraines during his second voyage, he managed to deliver over 2,000 plants representing 5 different varieties to the Caribbean. On February 5th, 1793, his ship, the HMS Providence, landed in Jamaica, stopping first at Port Royal and moving on to Port Morant, where some of the trees were unloaded and planted at the Bath Botanic Gardens, where some of the trees remain today. Plants were also distributed to other parishes. This was not Bligh's first visit to Jamaica. He had lived in Lucy, Hanover from 1783 to 1787. Bligh was awarded 1,500 guineas by the Jamaican Assembly. The breadfruit grew naturally on Jamaican soil, but it took many years before the slave population would attempt to eat the fruit they regarded as strange. Today, the breadfruit tree can be found all over Jamaica and enjoys strong ties to the Caribbean cuisine. On that 1793 voyage, Captain Bligh also introduced what we now call Otaheite apples. Their name comes from their island of origin, Tahiti, which in the 16th and 17th centuries were widely known as Otaheite. Bligh's connection to the Caribbean cuisine does not stop there, however. He also has ties to Jamaica's national fruit, the ackee. Found all over the island, the fruit is borne in clusters on evergreen trees. Its name is derived from the West African Akai fufo. The tree is not endemic to Jamaica but was introduced from West Africa during the 18th century. The plant was further named Blygia sapida in honor of Captain Bligh, who took samples to London Kew Gardens in 1793. Sapida speaks to the fruit's savoriness. Although ackee has been introduced to many other countries, Jamaica remains one of the countries where it is most widely eaten. In some African countries, however, ackee skin is used as a soap and pulverized ackee as fish poison. Here we look at the origins of other Jamaican fruits and spices. Guava, cassava, cashew, and cocoa are native to the West Indies. Guava is an Arawak word, and cassava is widely used by Tainos who call it yoka, meaning staff of life. Cashew thrives best in areas of low rainfall, and at one time in Jamaica, cashew nuts in their shells were used in several children's games. Cocoa, found in Jamaica from before the time of Columbus, rose in importance after 1847, when the manufacture of chocolate began. Pimento. Pimento is indigenous to Jamaica. Grapefruit. Interestingly, grapefruit is said to have probably originated in Jamaica because the first written record of the term grapefruit comes from Jamaica in 1814. Its name comes from the fact that it grows in clusters like grapes. The grapefruit is a hybrid of the sweet orange and a citrus plant named shaddock, after the captain who first brought it to the West Indies from Polynesia in the 18th century. The artanique, a uniquely Jamaican fruit first propagated in Manchester, is, as its name suggests, a cross between orange and tangerine. Let us look at some not-so-native fruits. Banana and the pineapple. The banana and the pineapple were introduced to the West Indies by the Spanish. The banana, meaning food of the wise in Latin, arrived in Jamaica as early as 1520. The Gros Michel variety came from Martinique in 1835. The pineapple appears on the Jamaican coat of arms, and the pineapple watermark is used for printing of Jamaican currency. It is believed Jamaica supplied Hawaii with its first commercial variety of pineapples. Coffee. Coffee originated in Ethiopia and was first planted in Jamaica at Temple Hall, St. Andrew by former Governor Nicholas Laws in 1728. Mangoes came to us from Lord Rodney's 1782 capture of a French ship at sea. The guinep came to us from Suriname around the mid-19th century, and sorrel, a member of the hibiscus family, from the Sudan. Nutmeg. Nutmeg was brought to Jamaica by a Dr. Martyr, most likely from the Dutch Spice Islands. Yam. Yams, whose names come from the Senegalese nyami, meaning to eat, were another important crop because they provided the crucial vitamin C that enabled sailors to battle the dreaded scurvy. It is said that yams came to Jamaica from Africa in a Portuguese slave ship. Ginger. Ginger is one of the island's earliest exports. Sugar cane and tamarinds were introduced to Jamaica from the East Indies in the 16th and 17th centuries respectively. From the early 18th to the middle of the 19th century, sugar was the island's chief export. It has so far proved an impossible task to pin down the exact origin of the famous Fern Gully. In 1981, an 8-man technical committee advising the relevant minister on rehabilitating Fern Gully gave him a brief history of it, as far as they were able, but informed the minister that its origin was either obscure or lost. None of the early maps of Jamaica in the 18th and 19th centuries that I've looked at give any indication of Fern Gully, nor in almost all cases of a road following such a route. The map on screen comes from a tourist map of the island of Jamaica, published around 1900, in a pamphlet entitled The Happy Month in Jamaica, which was produced by the United Fruit Company to attract tourists to the island. This is the first map I have found which names Fern Gully and shows the road through it. The map was intended especially for cyclists, who would certainly have appreciated the information on roads and on gradients, which the map included. Possibly, Fern Gully started out with an underground river flowing through caves, the roofs of which later collapsed. Some have suggested that it was created in the 1760s by a flash flood, but do not seem to indicate the source of this information. Edward Long, in his History of Jamaica, 1774, wrote, "Near Ocherias, or as it is now more commonly called, Cherias Bay, in this parish, the road from St. Mary passes through Walter's plantation to the westward up a steep hill. This road have been gullied very much about 11 years ago, by a heavy fall of rain in October. The skeleton of an Indian was laid bare to view, about 5 feet below the surface." End quote. But this does not seem to refer to Fern Gully, rather to the road eastwards into St. Mary. However, in 1785, it is said that the House of Assembly authorized expenditure on altering and completing the road from Moneague to Ocherias Bay, and that in 1800, the Journal of the Assembly referred to that road passing through the gully. It is also suggested that Fern Gully was at first called Ocherias Gully, but I have not so far found that name being used. So if anyone can throw some light on that claim, please, I'd really appreciate it. However, I have recently discovered references to it as the Gully Road, so I'm gonna include some of that here. So far, the earliest usage that I've found of the name the Gully Road is in the 29 Years in the West Indies and Central Africa, a review of missionary work and adventure, 1829 to 1858, by the Reverend Hope Masterton Waddell, a famous Presbyterian missionary in Jamaica and especially West Africa. In an account of his travels in the island in 1837 to 38, he wrote, "At Ocherius I turned towards the interior, up a road which I was told would go to Goshen, where our brother Mr. Jameson, lately arrived, has settled. It was called the Gully Road, and was a strange and ancient-looking way, but whether a work of art or natural formation could not be known. Its name partly describes its character. It led inwards between ranges of forest-clad hills, and was walled on both sides by continuous lines of moss-grown rock, mantled with creepers, like old ivy-clad mason work. No stream flowed there, nor was the way encumbered with loose rocks and masses of debris, and heaps of sand like an old watercourse. The surface seemed of smooth solid rock. It was a piece of antiquity, as if it had been made or discovered by the Spaniards and then forgotten. Neither man nor beast appeared for miles, nor watchman's hut, nor provision ground, nor any sign of human labor on stone or tree. Fine timbers grew untouched, or lay rotten where they fell. All was old and grey, silent and solitary. After plodding mile after mile through that gloomy and lonely avenue without seeing a living thing or means of outlet, I began to be anxious for some escape from the defile before night. At length, the way brightened, the hills opened, the summit was reached. Human habitations were discovered, and by various true unusual paths, I gained my destination. I had been misguided in taking that way. The right one, called the Barcadia Road, led from Frankfort Wharf, where I had spent the night with the watchman 2 years before, up the sides of the mountains and through the magnificent scenery of the White River, with which I had the pleasure at a later period of making a delightful acquaintance." End quote. It is clear from this excerpt that the name Gully Road was well established, but also that ferns were not apparently particularly notable in its vegetation. At least the writer did not mention seeing them in the gloomy and lonely avenue. The Reverend Mr. Waddell seemed in fact somewhat put out that he had been misdirected to this unattractive route, rather than the more magnificent scenery of the White River, which would have taken him directly to Goshen. It would be good to find some earlier references to the Gully Road, which was certainly not noted by Lady Nugent in March 1802 when she passed through St. Ann, by the coast road which she described as frightful, so narrow and rocky, and the precipices dreadful. Who else described the Gully Road in the first 4 decades of the 19th century? It also seems that the planting of ferns along the Gully Road, if it was ever done deliberately, must have happened in the 3 decades between Waddell's time and the early 1870s, when it was the ferniest gully one visitor had ever seen. We'll get to that. Just recently, while tracking down another topic in 19th century Jamaica, I came across a reference to Moncrief Gully in an account written by an anonymous visitor to Jamaica, presumably around 1860. The gully described, from location and physical character, seemed to be what was later named Fern Gully. So far, the only other use of this name that I have found is in a volume of the Manual of Conchology, Study of Mollusk Shells. That's in 1904 on page 10, about a shell found in Jamaica, Moncrief Gully, parish of St. Ann. It will be interesting to find out if anyone has references to the gully under this name. Here from the Dublin University magazine, June 1861, the column Scene and Customs in the West Indies, Jamaica. Descending the northern face of Mount Diablo, we soon entered a district, the scenery of which again was quite unlike what we had ever expected to see. We entered the wonderful volcanic fissure of ravine extending for 2 miles northwards called Moncrief Gully. Though the sun was still powerful, his influence did not penetrate those deep shades. The gully is just wide enough to allow 2 carriages to pass, while the rocks on either side tower abruptly to the height in some places of about 300 feet, but so dense is the foliage that it is only occasionally that the rock itself is detected. From every crevice and fissure, and from every base to the summit, trees, large and small, start forth, arch over and interlace their branches, and tower far up into the blue chink of the sky that is visible. They are densely covered with parasitical plants, and seem to be corded together with singular vegetable ropes. These, later in their turn, are also bound with convolvuli, and sponsees, morning glory, otherwise known, which springing from below, catch the dependent suckers and climb up them, showing out at every leafy articulation a red, white, yellow, blue or purple blossom. Occasionally, a fallen tree with its load of parasites, stay like ropes, bridges the ravine, and a stray slanting beam broke through some slight opening. The effect was enchanting." End quote. It is interesting that the word fern occurs only once, perhaps relating the description more to the Reverend Hope Waddell's grimmer account than to Marion North's ferniest gully. By the time Marion North traveled this route in 1871 and 72, it had become the very ferniest gully. Marion North was one of many artists who have visited Jamaica over the centuries. During her visit in 1871 and 72, she spent some time on the north coast and wrote of traveling back to the south through St. Ann, ascending some of the very ferniest gully she ever saw. This surely must have been what later became famous as Fern Gully, already well planted with ferns in the early 1870s, but not that date identified by the name it later acquired. The painting on screen seems to be of the fern walk in the mountains near Newcastle, but it does illustrate the type of vegetation she was recording. About the same time, Antonio Gallenga, a famous Italian writer and a correspondent for the Times of London, visited the island and wrote in the Pearl of the Antilles in 1873 of riding up the famous Gully Road. In 1883, Marion North's friend, Lady Brassey, wrote in her journal of her short stay in Jamaica. She wrote in glowing terms of her family's drive through the moonlit Gully Road. She and her husband and children were on one of the numerous cruises on their ship, the Sunbeam. Certainly from her description, Gully Road already deserved the Fern Gully title, which it was sure to assume in about 10 years' time. Also, in 1883, William C. Bates wrote of his visit to Jamaica in Appalachia, the Journal of the Appalachian Mountain Club of Boston. He also described the Gully Road. The Gully Road is a weird place, as steep as carriage roads can be, some 2 miles long and overshadowed by trees and steep banks. The sun may sometimes punctuate it, but not in the afternoon, if even at noonday. Dank moss and nodding ferns line the banks, and boughs meet overhead. A semi-twilight pervades. Here is the home of the solitaire, strange bird of the forest, seldom seen by man. Its call so mournful that it has been likened to that of a lost soul." End quote. The term Gully Road continued to be accepted name for the road out of Ocherias toward Monique, until it seems the promoters of the Monique Hotel decided that the phrase Fern Gully was more appealing in their advertisements, perhaps in part because of the fern craze of the period. There is also the suggestion that Fern Gully was created when it was planted with ferns by George Samuel Genman in the 1870s, when he was on the staff of Jamaica's botanical gardens. He is also acknowledged as something of an expert on Jamaican ferns. This sounds a reasonable possibility, but no evidence seemed to exist to support it. In an editorial in October 1879, and Genman's last report as superintendent of botanical gardens, the Gleaner referred to a new fern house where the scientific culture of this exquisite branch of the flora of Jamaica can receive due consideration, and to ferns of which a specimen of a fan species, a native of Jamaica but new to science, had been added to the gardens. However, neither when Genman left for British Guinea at the time, nor at the time of his death in March 1902, is there any mention of Fern Gully. In his introduction to his On the List of the Jamaican Ferns, Genman in fact makes it clear that his work on ferns had been confined to the Blue Mountains, particularly the southern slopes, and urges the need for similar work on the northern slopes. It seems fairly certain that whatever Genman's contribution to the study of Jamaica's ferns, he was not responsible for the wonderful gully. Others also seem to believe that Fern Gully was planted up in the 1880s, and this certainly seems a reasonable proposition, since as we shall see, the first mentions of Fern Gully seem to come up in 1890. Michael Burke, wrote in the Observer 29th of the 12th, 1905, that Fern Gully is a dried up riverbed in which a retired army major planted over 500 species of fern in the 1880s. However, I have so far not been able to find any mentions of this project. Whoever carried it out, again, perhaps someone can provide further information on this. While doing a little more research for this video, I came across another claimant to the creation of Fern Gully, whom I have not seen mentioned elsewhere. In the account of a meeting in St. Anne's Bay in 1933 attended by the MLC D.T. Wint, as recorded a claim by Charles Nicholas Hemming, a land surveyor of Claremont in St. Anne, to have surveyed Fern Gully for the government and to have planted all the ferns there in 1895. The audience apparently agreed with this claim, but in a letter printed a few days later, another St. Anne resident pooh-poohed Hemming's story. Guys, I'm gonna show you pictures of the letter on screen, alright? Really hope there will be other comments on the matter, but so far I've not found any. Hemming was indeed a surveyor from 1896 and could possibly have been involved in some program of rehabilitation of the gully, a forerunner of many later. Indeed, a public works report for 1895 and 1896 referred to the improvement of the drainage of the Fern Gully Road. But Fern Gully certainly existed before 1895, referred to, though not by name, by the governor, Sir Henry Blake, in 1890, and constantly mentioned in advertisements for the Monique Hotel. So far now, that is where the search for the beginnings of Fern Gully must stand. It will be great if someone can come up with further information on this topic. Guys, the research is not finished. This is not the official video, but I really did want to share all of this with you guys. If you found this topic interesting and informative, please do let me know in the comment section down below. Remember to give the video a thumbs up, and links will be on screen. Our links will be in the description if you want to support Elite Jamaica or if you want to help me with my GoFundMe. Alright guys, y'all stay blessed. Have a wonderful day.
Elite Jamaica. Don't forget to drop a like and a comment. Don't forget to subscribe.